This is NDTV. And you're watching NDTV Prime.
Well, it's that time of the year. It's March, early March in fact, and the same time where there's so much focus on women. In fact, an entire day, we are told, also devoted to celebrating women, their achievements, recognizing their challenges and hopefully looking for solutions. But this year, keeping all the platitudes and lip service apart, we thought that we'll get those who are running their own companies, women who are entrepreneurs and who have blazed new trails. And what do they think about being a woman in India's entrepreneurial space? Let me introduce my very special panel to you. We'll start with Anu Acharya, founder and CEO of Mapmygenome, a Hyderabad-based DNA and gene testing company. Manisha, Raisinghani, co-founder and CTO of Loginext. This is a logistics data analytics startup. Also, Dr. Ridwana Sanam. She's a founder and managing director for KRV Healthcare and Physiotherapy Limited. Thanks all so much for taking time out to be with us. Anu, I want to start by asking you, if one takes a look at the statistics, there's very little to celebrate. We are set to have a gender-biased startup ecosystem in India. Only 21 of 670 funded startups in 2016 were run by women. We're also told, according to the Global Women Entrepreneurship Leader Scorecard, that India fares very poorly in women entrepreneurship. I want to ask you, as someone who's always been just so comfortable in your space, in what you do, and also making it look effortless, what do these stats really say to you? What do they really mean? When you hear these numbers, do you think, oh my God, the glass is half empty? Or is there a story that these numbers don't reveal?
Well, I think, when you think about entrepreneurship, I think it's true that there is a bias and, that, the numbers, at least on the funding side, might be ridiculously small. I think what we need to really look at is whether, women entrepreneurs are being able to create the right kind of businesses which are sustainable and long-term. And I think once we start doing that, it wouldn't matter how much money you've raised as long as you've created successful businesses. So I think the way I look at it is that, it's fine. I think, even if there is a bias, even if the numbers look small, one is that they can only grow higher. We can only make it better. And the second thing is that I think we need to be able to say that it's businesses or creating businesses is about creating impact and not necessarily about how much you've raised. Once you've been able to create the right kind of business, I think we will be able to change the numbers so that the next generation, I think the numbers will start looking much better. So at least I look at it as being, half full at this stage.
Optimistic as ever. That's really good to know. Manisha, to all those who say that India doesn't have enough role models when we talk about women founders, women entrepreneurs, people like yourself, Anu, Dr. Ridwana, clearly proved that wrong. But to those who say that we need a lot more, those numbers are missing, women need to be out there, there need to be far more role models, how do you respond?
So I would say it totally depends on the input, and accordingly you'll have the numbers in the output. So when I was in the school, there was 50% girls and 50% boys. When I went to engineering, the ratio further reduced. The ratio to girls to guys was less than, of course, 1:1. And then when I went to Carnegie Mellon, when I was doing my masters, the ratio further reduced. So we were just like 8 girls in a class of 40 people. So as you see, as the women, as you go above the curve, the ratio
number of women starts falling down, right?
The number of women starts falling down. So the number of women who actually start up is really low, and that's why the number of funded startups having women co-founders is low. So it's not that the investors are biased, that if it's a woman co-founder.
But where are the women? The women are just missing, right? You make an important point that before I get Dr. Ridwana in, Anu, come in at this point. Now, this is something that, you and I have discussed in the past, and we can talk about this with Manisha as well. Women in technology. We largely have technology startups. Women in technology, woefully inadequate. We don't somehow, even now, we don't really believe that science and tech is a very mainstream field for girls. Look at our IITs and just look at the abysmal ratios of boys to girls that we have there. Do you see that changing?
No, I think that is changing. I think, when I look at my daughters and their generation, I think that has totally changed. And I think that's heartening to see. I don't see the difference. I mean, I think they are conditioned very differently. And I think going forward, my hope is that, we will start seeing a much better ratio, in the IITs as well as in all the other science, science and engineering colleges. The challenge always has been to be able to keep these girls motivated after they've graduated from college, right? To be able to say what next. And I think, if you start looking at the number of women who are actually going into technology jobs or startups is increasing. So I'm saying that it's a matter of time. We will see that happen, but it is still, I think, given from, I graduated in 95, and at that point, I think the numbers were, 10 girls to 400. And I think today, there is a talk about, being able to get almost about 30% of them as being women. So I think, there needs to be some changes in terms of policies, and which will encourage more women to come. But at the same time, I think it is also happening organically and also happening naturally, because those 10 or 20 people who were there in the beginning, for instance, 10 out of 20 out of 400, I think, you're likely to see that the next generations would probably also encourage. And I start seeing a lot more families now making sure that girls are encouraged to pursue a science career, and I think that's where my optimism comes from.
Right. And if certainly not discouraged either way, even if they're not encouraged. Dr. Ridwana, you were making an important point earlier. You come from Pahalgam. So,
Yes.
You're from Kashmir, you're a woman, you come from, you said, a conservative family. You wanted to do something that your family wasn't sure about, but you have persisted. There are people like you, there might be young girls like you who want to know, where did you get the conviction from? What would you say?
I would say it's important to have the vision clear, short-term goal, long-term goal. If it's not about age, like sometimes we are waiting for business schools that they teach us this. But some leaderships are inbuilt in some people. Like from me, it was, I would say in me, it was right from the childhood. I was in my family, I was very different. My thought process was very different. And I never thought of that I'm in a like small town. There are less opportunities. I look at it always as a positive, in a positive manner, that if a person would like to do anything, then there are resources, there are solutions. So I looked at it as a solution for every problem. There were a lot of challenges, a lot of problems at every stage, whether it is on family front or I belong to a state where there was, a lot of crisis. When I have passed my 10th, you won't believe that was the peak in Kashmir where it was curfew. And I went for my examination. I still remember there was a threat that anything can happen anytime, maybe the blast or something. And at my like home, there was no tuition. There was nothing, no opportunity. That time the internet was not working. So in those, I would say at that time also that something in me was not to look at it, to blame my parents that they are not able to provide me the tuitions. I'm not able to study because of the circumstances, what is happening there in the Jammu and Kashmir. So I was more focused on my books, my career, that I need to get these many marks. I have to top this year. So that positive mindset was always there to encourage me to reach to
That's
my
such a
goal.
fantastic story, not just for women, I think, but from people from the part of the country that you really
So being a
that you
girl,
come from.
I took it as a challenge. I qualified 10th nicely. I did my 12th from there. Then I wanted to go for education out of J&K in like Canada, Karnataka. So that time the challenge was, in my family, no girl was gone out. Like I was the first girl in family who wanted to, go out of J&K from the state to study for higher studies. So that challenge also, I motivated my parents. They had no knowledge actually about this profession.
But they supported you.
Yes.
That says a lot about them as well. They may have been concerned, but they backed you.
The best support was even, it was like they had trust on me. Whatever she's going to do will be definitely good for her. They said, we can trust you, but rest is your decision. You take your decision.
Right, and of course, I'm sure that you made them very proud. Manisha, come in here. Among the people that you say that you look up to include Sheryl Sandberg. Now, in that fascinating book of hers, Lean In, she talks very eloquently about what's holding women back, and something that she speaks extensively about is very often it's also the role played by other women. It's almost become a cliche now to say that. But do you believe that we need women leaders to encourage women like themselves? Because that's another point of a big debate. There are those who say, no, if you are a woman leader, you've got to make sure that you're taking in people on the basis of their strengths and skills only and not gender.
So India as a society is considered to be very constrained for women. And if there are more and more examples of women leadership, then more families will be more comfortable to, send their daughters, send their kids to maybe do further studies, especially in tech and science. As we have seen, there are very few women. So the industry that we work in is a logistics industry, and that is like purely male-dominated society. Now, whenever we have meetings, we go for CIO, CEOs meetings. So I am the only one in the entire conference room who has a voice of a girl. And for these guys, for CIOs and CEOs who are mid-40s or mid-50s, it's really uncomfortable for them to break the ice with me.
Absolutely.
What I do is I just talk business and I break the ice. So having more and more leaders, having more and more examples, it will just help. And it's not about the government, I would say. It's not about the society only. Because even in the US, if you see,
absolutely, the numbers are pretty
Sheryl
pathetic
Sandberg,
there
right?
too.
There's a lean-in circle she runs, and that too in the most developed nation.
Right.
So it's not only about India, it's just, I would say, a myth in general that women leadership is glass half empty. If you look at the achievements, is as good as the men.
As good, certainly. There's absolutely no denying that. The numbers might be few, but achievements are as good. In fact, I would stick my neck out and say even better when I look at people like all of you that I have on the panel. Anu, come in here. Now, Manisha makes a good point there, that there are people, especially when you're starting out, there are people who are unsure about where you've come from, unsure about your skill, mainly, of course, men going into a room where you are the only woman, but you come from a position of strength, and getting them to take you seriously. How challenging is that?
Well, I guess, now at this point, after 17 years of being an entrepreneur, it's a fairly easy thing to do, right? But I mean, I do understand that, if you are a 20-year-old, 22-year-old, woman who's just started a business, I think it can be a little bit, uncomfortable at times when you go over there and you're the only person, because part of it is that you also start thinking that, you start looking at the room and maybe it also induces some sort of, that whole, 99 to 1, problem over there. But I think it is definitely, in order to break that, I think it's very important that you don't look at yourself as being, a woman. You're there in that context, in being an entrepreneur or as being a business person or whatever role you're playing at that point. So I think the way to break through all of this is, yes, there will be biases, and there are biases because that's how those other people also grew up, and that's how maybe you also grew up. So I think a lot of what happens in a lot of meetings and in a lot of presentations would be based on what these other people have gone through. So I think the way I've looked at it in the last many years is to say that, in the end, it's not just about, when people say something, they're saying it because of the baggage that they've come from. And it's important for me to be able to take that off and be able to, look at that meeting as a negotiation by understanding where they come from. And I think it takes time, and it can be a little bit, sometimes you might get into meetings where it is, you might have people with very patronizing behaviors, you might have other kinds of issues. But I think it's important that you start to break it down and see what is it that you really want from there, and make sure that you make the best use of that and move forward. I think it's most important to be able to say, how do I do the best that is for my startup, or what do I do which will make sense over here. So I think at least I've been able to very carefully compartmentalize it when I'm going in a business meeting versus otherwise, and it works out. I think in the end, I think you have to be as comfortable as any, as you would be with the group of your own friends. Right. So I think you can do that once you start shredding off their background and where their biases come from. It becomes easier.
Right, like you said, just stay focused on what you're there to achieve and what you can do to achieve it. Dr. Ridwana, there are those who say, that these labels are also in our heads. They are in the heads of women women because of the way we've been brought up, about, you know, what society tells us. But we need to keep these labels out. I could be a boy, I could be a girl, but challenges sabke liye wahi hai. And when I go into that room, so they're going to look at me on my skills. What do I have to say? Mujhe business ke bare mein kya pata hai? How much do I know about it? How confident am I? And what can I say, or how can I tell them that they have every reason to take me seriously?
I think if it's about knowledge, if I have the knowledge of the subject, so if I know my job, and everybody would appreciate whether it is male or female. And but what I have realized in India, when we as women, you know, for me, my profession is a physiotherapy. So there was even a national channel, DD National, wanted to, you know, a program on me, where the person asked me a question: do you treat only female patients or male patients? Can you imagine? So, and we talk about the
it's
women
just the
empowerment.
mindset that we are not able to break out of.
So what happened?
What was your response?
My response was, I am just a
seeing the patient,
doctor, healer. Am I right?
Absolutely.
I have to just see the patient. Patient is a patient, and it's just the relationship between the doctor and patient. So how could I be biased if somebody is in pain, or there I have to stop a surgery because I am surgery prevented department. I prevent surgeries. So I said it's a big challenge for me. So I have to more focus on my knowledge.
Absolutely.
It's just the patient. It's just a human body in front of me.
A patient is a patient. I agree entirely.
So I would say, but when it was about the meeting with investors, I would say the networking and all, and when there are business meets, and I could realize in my profession, I was a single lady always. Right. And it's more of men, boys. So girls normally don't prefer this profession. So we have less girls in India. You see, there is no sports physiotherapist as such with the cricket team, because physiotherapy has a very important role in sports.
Absolutely.
But there are only boys. Why? Because they have to stay with them for 24 hours.